Force of Nature once again brings us to Season 7, which I have referred to as the season where we ran out of ideas. Force of Nature is pretty much the poster child for this, as you'll discover as we go along. To begin with, Data is visiting Geordi because Geordi has been watching Spot, trying to decide if he wants to get a cat of his own. This is one of our plots for the episode. Note that I did not say subplot, I said one of our plots. This isn't running in the background. Right now, this is a load-bearing plot. Geordi, Data, and a cat. Anyone who has ever derided a Ferengi plot on DS9, look upon something that makes even that seem like the city on the edge of forever by comparison. The upshot is that Spot has trashed Geordi's quarters, and Data says, basically, what do you expect? It's a cat. Cats are like mean toddlers armed with a knife. Geordi asks Data to get rid of it before he heads to the transporter room and beams it into the quarters of someone he hates. But Data has no control over Spot. He just lets the cat do whatever it wants, which Geordi says is probably a horrible idea, even worse than trying to do an Independence Day sequel. We have no choice but to go to the titles to give him time to think about that, and we return for the captain's log telling us that the Enterprise is out here investigating the Flemings' disappearance. The search is not going to be easy because this area makes it hard to travel at warp speed due to the Tetryon fields in the area, plus the fuzz is always looking to pull you over and give you a ticket.
We've installed multi-phase buffers on all the sensor modules, Captain. Should help a little.
Sounds good. Anytime we can multi-phase something, I want that done. That'll confuse anyone who's catching on to what quantum might mean. We soon learn that the Ferengi were spotted in the area, and the Fleming, which is a medical ship, was carrying biomimetic gel, so they might have something to do with that. It's something to think about, but first we have to introduce the third plot of the episode. Geordi is fine-tuning the engines. Not to make them any better, just to get a better conversion ratio out of them.
Fine.
Well, your cat exploits aren't going to carry the whole episode. We need something to fill out the fact that we've no idea what to do. It seems Geordi is in a friendly competition with the chief engineer on the Intrepid to see who can get the better conversion ratio. But let's not focus on this too long. When it comes to geeks doing trivially geeky things, better to spoon-feed it to the audience so they don't get bored. No, can't have that. Let's instead move on to Geordi and Data calibrating the sensors. They're not quite right, so they'll have to go around and futz with them. Checking over the sensors goes on longer than half a minute, which is why I refuse to accept that the thing with the missing Fleming is the plot. So far, we have had over 2 minutes dedicated to the cat, nearly 2 minutes to the opening title sequence, and well over 2 minutes to Geordi messing with the engines and the sensors, while the missing ship has received 1 minute 45 seconds of airtime, which includes the captain's log. And our next step is to return to the cat plot. At this point, the only reasonable conclusion is that the title, Force of Nature, is describing how uncontrollable Spot is. Alright, let's get down to the breakneck speed that is the plot of Force of Nature.
Let's see what we've got.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
No, this isn't it either. Clearly there's a misalignment somewhere in this system, that's for sure.
Well, we've got one more possibility.
Now, in a normal episode, this kind of thing would be a sign of a much larger problem connected with the main plot. But as we have established, there is no main plot, so we're just following Geordi and Data around while they do mundane things and talk about a cat. Now, this would be fine if the scene was intended to show good character interactions or to be punctuated with humor, but aside of Geordi's suggestion on shooting Spot with a phaser, we don't get that either. We're closing in on the end of the first act, and what exactly have we accomplished here?
Phase alignment is stabilized. However, sensor efficiency has increased by only an additional 1.3%.
It's not much, but every little bit's gonna help.
Wow, that sure was worth the 10-minute build-up to that big reveal, huh? Perhaps for lucky, we can watch Picard test the water in his fish tank to see if he needs to add chemicals to optimize the environment. Eventually, they find the Ferengi transport ship. Yes, God help us all, our best chance of rescue from watching two guys performing routine maintenance are the Ferengi. Let's see what's up with them. According to the sensors, the Ferengi ship is pretty much helpless at the moment. They can't even pick up communications right now.
I could modify one of our deflector emitters to transmit old-style delta waves.
They'll be able to read our dreams then? That won't help. The Ferengi respond by shooting at them. I guess they did have everything working after all. For all the good that does them. The Enterprise take their weapons down with one shot. When they finally get the communications set up, the Ferengi insist that they were acting in self-defense because the Enterprise had already disabled their ship and were moving in for the kill. But with a little arm twisting thanks to their position as sitting ducks, the Daemon agrees to meet with Picard to discuss what happened. He says that what appeared to be a Federation sensor buoy was actually a trap, disabling much of their ship when it went off, so they assumed it was some kind of Federation mine, which Picard is indignant about. How dare you assume we were up to no good? Where's the trust? Where's the understanding? Where's the common decency? Well, why did you come after us then? Because we assumed you were up to no good. They'd like to see the Ferengi logs around the attack, but the entire crew is too busy trying to fix their ship.
Daemon, if we assigned an engineering team to assist you with your repair efforts, would that give you time to retrieve your logs?
Oh, God, please tell me we're not going to be following a repair team around for the next 10 minutes while they try to fix the Ferengi ship this time? Please, anything but that.
Spot. 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 Down.
Oh, good. We really dodged a bullet there. Thanks, episode. After Data embarrasses himself by showing that he's better trained than the cat is, the plot is now ended. Yes, it was so important we put it in the teaser, and yet we just stopped it without further comment about 2/3 of the way through the second act. Yeah, this show was well thought out, wasn't it? And what we abandon it for at this point is heading back to the playing with the engines plot. The thing that really should be asked about this is, and I'm being serious here, why is this here? Really, why is this here? That should have been asked of them. The answer should be something along the lines of, it provides character insight, except that it doesn't. This whole thing could have taken up probably 15 seconds and achieved the exact same goal. It provides the setup for a later event, such as rescuing the Enterprise due to Geordi's little hobby, which this doesn't either. It is entertaining in its own right. Except no, obviously, it is not. Technobabble playing with the engines is about as novel as Picard saying, make it so. The only explanation that can be provided is, it's shameless padding. The missing Fleming plot finally struggles to push aside Geordi's pointless engine tweaking and Data trying to train his cat so we can actually have something of substance happen in the episode. Well, at least we'll try. While investigating what might be a debris field, the Enterprise is hit by the same thing that hit the Ferengi ship, shutting down their warp drive and all subspace-related stuff. That means there's nothing to do as the ship flies in and beams over, and then they stand in front of the warp core looking insufferable.
We're trying to make you listen.
You're killing us.
If we have to sit through more of this episode, our people are doomed. They insist that the warp engines are causing damage and will render their planet uninhabitable, based upon research that was examined by the Federation and found to be baseless. So these people went back to it, did even further research that proved that it was the case, and quite naturally said, screw the proper channels, let's just dick with anyone who flies around here until we get somebody's attention, because everyone knows that if you want to get someone in the mood to listen to your desperate ravings, you should go out and shoot their tires first. Riker reads them the riot act over this asshole behavior, and thankfully they don't get all smug at him like so often happens. It'll take a day and a half to get the Enterprise back underway, but she says she can cut that down to 12 hours, so long as they agree to look over her work. Picard's handling of this is about as reasonable as you can be. These two numbnuts, as much of a pain as they are, could actually be right, so we're not going to ignore this simply out of spite. But this is also basically an act of terrorism, so yeah, they'll look at the data, and these two better fix the ship, turn off all of the mines, and help them find the Fleming, or else they're all going to get locked up. She doesn't like the idea, but her brother, the sensible one, agrees to this. Geordi's not too happy. This little stunt has effed up their engines good, but she brushes off what happened to the Enterprise as nothing. And the Fleming, too. Obviously, we're sympathetic to anyone who is blasé about breaking the spaceship equivalent of an ambulance.
And saving lives is precisely what we're trying to do.
Yeah, well, you have a very interesting way of going about it.
There's no point in trying to talk to you. You've already decided not to listen.
Wow. Nice day to you too, Dick.
Commander, I know my sister can be somewhat,
Of a bitch?
but please try to understand. She believes profoundly in this cause. She has sworn to dedicate her life to exposing the dangers of warp drive.
Oh, good. I'd hate to be talked down to by someone who's half-hearted about the whole thing. To further prove her insufferable superiority, Data looks over everything and explains that the idea is that exposure to warp field is slowly damaging this region of space, and over time, it will eventually lead to rifts forming with subspace. This is, however, only a possibility. It's potentially extremely dangerous and thus requires further study. Because, you see, the solution to this problem is a pretty radical proposal. They completely stop all warp travel to and from their planet, isolating it from the rest of the Federation. So imagine if suddenly there was a proposal made to combat climate change by saying that no one could ever travel to and from Japan ever again. That's the kind of thing you'd really want to carefully explore first, if nothing else than to ensure that there's a very good reason that we'll be forever losing replacement parts for our Nissans and all our DVDs of tentacle porn.
That's your response. More research. More delays. I suppose I shouldn't have expected anything different.
Yeah, how dare we not drop everything based solely upon someone who, to prove just how sound her judgment was, said, "I need to create my own minefield. You know, for science." You haven't even convinced the smartest guy in the room of this with your Data. And Data is his middle name. It is, in fact, his only name. She storms off, disappointed that they actually insist upon using science to solve this. As if this is some kind of Jack Bauer ticking clock situation where we're days away from the whole area opening a gateway to hell and demons pouring out. Well, the Enterprise proposed to go and get the Fleming, which they have finally found and is now helpless. Yeah, perhaps we could devote more attention to this if you hadn't gone and screwed up the flying ambulance. She decides to head back to her ship and do things her own way. She flies a little ways off and then causes a warp core breach, which then creates a subspace rift. Now, this is exactly what she warned could happen. If they waited too long before they took action, a subspace rift might have formed. That's why she had to convince them by deliberately making a subspace rift so that they don't make a subspace rift by accident. I mean, that's just common sense. Assuming, of course, you're a fucking dumbass. If you're so worried that destroying yourself and deliberately causing the very catastrophe you're so worried about preventing isn't quite a clusterfuck yet, this then puts the Fleming in fatal danger, possibly the Enterprise as well, which means that, of course, this person so intent on saving lives is going to possibly cause thousands of people to possibly die, and, on top of that, all knowledge about the potential threat dying with them. To cap this off, at the end of the episode, we learn that this rift that she created is going to begin altering the climate of their planet. Yes, really. As far as environmental messages go, this is like trying to prove your point by cutting down old growth trees to make into clubs to kill baby seals, and then using their organs to create a poison to give to everyone who agrees with you. At this point, I have to question whether or not you're actually on the side that you claim to be supporting. One thing that helps redeem this episode is that when Data and Geordi have moved past fiddling with the engines and the cat, they discuss these events. Geordi admits to being prejudiced against the ideas, partly because his love of technology. Now that's supposed to justify plot too, as if we needed to watch about 20 minutes of him crawling around doing basic maintenance to figure that out after 6 years. I suppose next we're going to have 15 minutes of Worf polishing a sword to prove that he likes honor. And also it was because she was so insistent on being adversarial in her approach. But Data also points out rightly that her entire theory was posited upon unproven assumptions, and that her quote-unquote proof was obtained doing something no reputable scientist would ever do. While Geordi seems to be thinking maybe she had to do this, Data is certain that, however right she happened to be, this was still entirely the wrong approach. This conversation moves what could easily have been martyr in the face of stubborn ignorance that we so often get in these kind of allegories to instead a social fanatic who rolled the dice and turned out to be right. Which I appreciate because I detest how often Star Trek takes an issue and makes it so shamelessly one-sided. It's frustrating when I disagree with them, and it's embarrassing when I do agree with them. Because the reason that I brought up replacement parts for Nissans is because my car is a Leaf. I need those parts in order to keep my electric car going. And it's one of many things I do for environmental reasons based upon sound, peer-reviewed scientific argument that has convinced me of the validity of their arguments. And not in the least by attention whores declaring that they're saving the world by acting self-righteous at any camera in sight. Alright, let's just try to wrap this up. Data has cooked up a plan of coasting through the rift to try to rescue the Fleming. But the Fleming has had no idea what's been going on. They just watched all hell break loose, so once they fix their warp drives, they try to get out of there as fast as possible, unaware that that would only make things worse. So the Enterprise beams them off and then rides one of the waves out like a surfboard. Anyway, after that works and a bit of discussing the repercussions, Picard talks about how warp drive's damage has now colored his views of his years of exploration, and a reminder to us all of the important environmental message: be careful when using faster-than-life technology. The post-episode follow-up. Annoying character goes to martyr scientist. Proving you're right by making things worse for everyone is just the cherry on top of a sundae no one wants. Final score for Force of Nature is 3 out of 10. Spiner and Burton have good chemistry, so they manage to make things at least watchable. But when your supposed main plot barely squeaks by at 55% of the runtime, and shares it with people who occasionally take a break from doing nothing to talk about the cat, it's time to scrap the whole thing and just start over. The way this is structured makes the episode feel like it should have been called Two Characters in Search of a Plot. This episode is what establishes the warp speed limit in Star Trek, something they've been kicking around for a while. To once again show how well things are thought out around here, this warp limit is the reason why Voyager's nacelles move when they go to warp. That action gets around the whole problem of the damage. Here's the thing, though. In the Federation, ship classes are named after the first of the line. The Defiant was the first of the Defiant classes. The Excelsior in Star Trek III was the first of the Excelsior class. And we even see the USS Galaxy at one point. That was the first of the Galaxy classes, and so on. Well, Voyager isn't the Voyager class, remember. It's the Intrepid class, of which the Intrepid was the first. And the Intrepid is, yes, the ship that Geordi is competing with in the episode. So, either by an astonishing coincidence, this ship was given a completely useless ability that was later discovered to have this anti-pollution feature, or, in their silly retcon, they forgot they were contradicting the episode the retcon uses as its excuse. There's the competence that so often is displayed with Voyager. Well, how can we follow up someone who is obsessed enough to blow themselves up? We'd have to turn to an episode called Obsession, wouldn't we? So, see you with Obsession next time.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!